Hey folks, this is your weekly most comprehensive look at the world of business, finance and economics. Welcome to another episode of Business Redefined. Last week we had a conversation on AI and embedding it in mobile telephony, specifically talking about Samsung S25. This device is amazing. If you haven't had an interaction with it, please make a point. Tonight we want to speak more broadly about the policy environment, the emerging issues, the opportunities, the risks, and some of the challenges that are potentially emerging from this. And we are privileged to have tech analyst and podcast host, that is Moses Kelibaro. Asante sana. Karibu.
Thank you for having me.
Great. Moses, first of all, I'm sure you have interacted with the S25. What are your initial impressions about its capabilities and the opportunities it unlocks?
So at the event last week here in Nairobi, the Galaxy Unpacked event, and we managed to spend a bit of time using the S25. And I think for me, apart from the fact, obviously, the design has been refined, it has more squared look and feel compared to the S24. For me, the big step forward really is that the device now has been upgraded, so to speak, to use AI in a slightly different way from the way it was in the previous edition. So in the first edition where we had Galaxy AI, we saw the opportunity to use generative AI to do a number of things. You could do something like sketch to draw, and it gives you an image using AI. You can use things like live translate that also use AI. You can transcribe on the device. So you're having a meeting with people. You don't have to connect to the cloud. It's able to take all the conversation, summarize it, capture the details of that. With the new S25, one of the features that we have is something called the companion AI. And this is representing a new shift in AI that everyone is saying is going to be big in 2025, which is called Agentic AI.
Yeah.
So Agentic AI is slightly different from generative because everything we've been using to date, whether it's OpenAI or any other platforms like Gemini, which of course runs on Galaxy AI and so forth, predominantly allow you to generate certain outcomes. You put in a text input, you get an image. You put in an image, it's able to understand what it is and so forth. So in Agentic AI, we move from simply generating things to actually having AI agents which are then able to do things on your behalf. Yeah. So in the case of the S25, it has the ability to connect to various apps within your phone, and it starts to essentially become almost like a personal assistant just for you. Yeah. So for instance, if you want to plan your flights or activities, able to connect to the various things and tell you that. It's able to look at your calendar, read what's going on, and be more proactive in terms of what it does for you. So we're now moving into the era of AI agents, which are essentially autonomous AI softwares that are able to then act on your behalf to specific actions. And already even globally, we're seeing that everyone is talking about Agentic AI being the next big thing, because in its sort of biggest iteration, you'd imagine, is where people are going to create agents that do the work that humans do today. So in a business environment, you'll have agents that maybe do sales. They're able to call you, talk to you, understand you, and do things around sales. You'll be having agents that are able to do data analytics, which is currently done by people. You'll have agents that are able to act like a virtual travel agent, for instance, and on and on and on. So these agents essentially autonomously are trained and built and programmed to do things for you. And right now, the S25 is one of the very first devices globally that has some of these capabilities built in. So that's a step forward from what we had before.
Moses, it feels like a very huge leap from the generative to the agentic AI. And maybe let's have a conversation around where we are positioned as a country. There's been a lot of talk in Kenya right now about the roadmap in covering AI from 2024 to I think 2028. Really, what are some of the issues emerging around it, especially from a regulatory, legal kind of discussion?
Well, obviously AI sort of breaks new ground in so many ways, right? And I think the reality is that it's going to be transformational across the board, whether it's agriculture, education, business as it were, the question around employment, the fact that now you have AIs that are able to do the work that was formerly done by people. Some of these are really, hot button issues in terms of what are the implications for people's jobs and security. When it comes to how AIs are even created, there are elements around security, elements around how an AI is built and whether it's biased to deliver information according to the creators of that AI. One of the challenges that, of course, exists when you want to build an AI framework or regulations is obviously where does that AI even reside? And of course, when you look at the costs involved in building an AI infrastructure, what they call AI factories, of which we're seeing countries globally starting to build their own AI infrastructures, the investments required sit in the billions of dollars. And we already see that today every major nation is starting to invest billions in deploying, at least in the West, building their own AI capabilities. You need data centers that consume a lot of energy, that have very expensive chips, the likes which come from the companies like NVIDIA, where they have, the various GPUs, which are the processors that actually power AI systems. Normally, you have to buy literally hundreds of thousands of those processors to build essentially a AI factory that's able to do all this work. So even as we talk about regulations and so forth, I think there's also the question around deploying the infrastructure that allows you to be an AI first economy. And it's becoming kind of one of those haves and have-nots disparities where you can start to see what the implications will be for countries like Kenya and the rest of Africa. Do we have the resources to invest that kind of money? What are the implications in terms of being globally competitive when people who are empowered with AI cannot just be more productive, but theoretically even smarter than your average worker in Africa? Now, when you look at that labor gap that we've had for many years, where Kenya and other African countries have been seen as a place providing high quality labor at an affordable price, what happens when there's an AI that can replicate what you do at a much lower cost? And especially in the agentic AI era, that's exactly what's going to happen. And quite often we say that, when it comes to AI, it's not that a person is going to lose their job to an AI per se. The person is going to lose their job to somebody empowered using and competent with an AI system or, various platforms that are available. But coming back to regulations, I mean, at this point in time, for me, it feels, even as we discuss those, and I know that right now we have the paper that's being circulated in Kenya around our own AI laws and so forth, I think we need to be thinking very, very carefully around how do we find ways to remain competitive without having to deploy massive resources in the way that we're seeing in many countries like, the US and others in Europe and China and so forth, so that we too can have some of that benefit. Yeah, so those are some of the things that come to mind.
So Moses, given what you've said about how capital intensive this is in a market like Kenya and the wider global south, where 7 out of every 10 businesses are small to medium sized, and they look at devices like this one and they're feeling disenfranchised, how would then we plug the gap and ensure that they also now are part of the embedding of AI in their day-to-day activity?
Well, at the most basic level, I always like to tell people the best way to do anything is to do it, right? Meaning that, we can, be hypothetical, we can talk about all the possibilities, all the barriers to adoption, but at the most affordable level, I mean, if you have today an AI-powered Samsung device, as an example, which is one of the things that I do, I go into meetings and without connecting to the internet, I can simply ask the people attending the meeting, do you mind if I record the conversation? And I put it on, and basically my phone is automatically recording but concurrently transcribing the meeting. Now, without spending a lot of money, except having bought that device, I now have access to these AI capabilities, which by the way are currently free on these Samsung devices that support it, such as Galaxy AI. And you suddenly have the ability to go into a meeting, capture the details of the meeting, and also get a summary, and that allows you to be more productive, because in many instances, somebody would then have to be taking notes manually, going back to the office, making sense of what that is, sending out that email and so forth. Whereas now I finish a meeting and usually in a matter of minutes, I'm able to send a summary of our conversation to the stakeholders in that meeting. Faster, easier, cheaper, better than doing it manually. Things like, for instance, you're able to use some of the free versions of platforms like, Gemini from Google, or even using ChatGPT, which doesn't, it has a free version and a paid version. The paid version, I think, is something like $20 a month. Now, for many people, that might be prohibitive, but if you think about how it empowers you, it's incredible. Or using a device such as your Samsung Galaxy AI, you have things like Live Translate. You're trying to do business with somebody maybe in a country where they don't speak English. And just think about that. And you can actually use this Live Translate to have a viable conversation either over the phone or even in person, so that it's translating what they're saying, it's translating what you're saying, and you're having a conversation. And I think that's what it does. It basically becomes an enabler. It allows people to do things they couldn't previously do pre-AI in a much more efficient and practical way. And we're seeing that gradually over time, since 2022, when ChatGPT first came out, in November, the level of adoption has been massive. It now cuts across everything. And I even am aware here in Nairobi that there are hospitals that are using AI tools whereby somebody might come in with a fractured leg, but because the AI is built into the software, it's able to see that maybe there could be indications of cancer in that same person's body. And the fact that a doctor now is able to deliver better healthcare because AI has now been, put into the medical diagnostics systems. So we see it cutting across everything. We're seeing prices are starting to come down. Even just over the last few weeks, I think it is both Microsoft and Google are now providing some of those AI features that were paid for before as part of the subscriptions in their productivity platforms, both for Google Workspace and also for Microsoft 365. So we're seeing this sort of, should I call it affordability factor? It's getting more common.
Yes.
And I'm trying to get to the sense where that organizations that are either using or not using some of these AI capabilities that are inherently built into things like now the productivity applications will be that much more competitive because they're able to compress time and process by using AI.
So Moses, as we talk about venturing into agentic AI, and especially in an environment where data protection has become a very key component, many are asking about security, and I'd like you to speak about some of the risks you see, if possible, as well as how we can circumvent those challenges.
Well, obviously, one of the things that comes into agentic AI is when you have systems that are now acting on your behalf, meaning they're able to open your web browser, they're able to do something on your calendar, you're able to give it a task, and it's able to execute on your behalf. Obviously, checks and controls are there, and already some of the early systems we are seeing do require your consent before they're able to do something. If it's something sensitive that maybe requires your credit card, or something that requires, logging into one of your privileged, web-based accounts, many of them are actually requiring you to, the way they've been built, to give it consent to do the next step. It won't just autonomously do everything. So that's one of the steps that they're putting into play. The other thing is, I think, when you're dealing with things where it's sensitive data or what we call first-party data within a sort of a data protection context, a lot of these systems need to be designed in such a way that they are respectful of those laws and those regulations, but also in a case where people assume things to be safe. Many organizations globally are starting to even build their own AI systems, or they're able to log in some of these publicly available systems, but they pay for an account where their first-party data is closed off from the rest of the world. Remember, even if you go into ChatGPT and you upload company documents, you are essentially putting confidential data, potentially confidential data, into a publicly available cloud system.
Yeah.
So depending on the kind of services you subscribe to or you pay for, you can pay for instances where you're closed off from the rest of the world. It's in a secure sandbox in a safe place, and therefore your data is then not being transmitted to international systems that might potentially, have leaks that could potentially give people access to that. We're also seeing instances where, depending on the data generated from some of these systems, there are risks also in cybersecurity. People have been using AI to do various things, but there's also risks around the content. Like, let's say if you're generating code, and that code potentially could have things like SQL injection, which if you were to install in your application, potentially could be having security flaws. So there's so many things where people are making assumptions that it's safe and secure, but the people building these platforms, it's upon them to make sure that the guidelines are very clear, that they're respectful of these laws and data privacy considerations. And more importantly, even for the end user to be educated around the fact that when you're using these systems, these are the do's and do nots, such as do not take confidential company info and put it into a public platform. You want to make sure that this is kept in a secure and a safe place. Going forward, I think what's going to happen is we start to build our own AI capabilities. Case in point is recently NVIDIA announced a $3,000 desktop machine, which is going to have essentially a supercomputer, which will be able to do a lot of the AI capabilities normally available in the cloud. So imagine a scenario like that if somebody's, the TVETs or the universities and other organizations where maybe innovation hubs could potentially be buying these $3,000 machines without having to release data to the public cloud and using it within a local environment. In fact, not even needing to be on the internet itself. So you do your models, you do your training, you do your inference on that particular device without necessarily having to link to a third-party system. So these are some of the options and possibilities that are emerging. And I think in the next 5 to 10 years, especially around security and so forth, we might find many instances, even for countries like Kenya, where we're able to domicile some of that AI capability without having to go to an external cloud to do so. As it is, we're seeing a proliferation of data centers, many of which are AI ready in Kenya, that are going to be able to host AI platforms, the likes of people like Meta, who have an open source Meta AI opportunity where you can use Llama within your own private data center. So we imagine in the future that some of these open source platforms, we see the likes of Google and Microsoft and others also launching local instances of the AI systems, through platforms like Azure. And I think increasingly in the next 2 to 5 years, we'll find that maybe a lot of that processing and capabilities will be sitting in market, in country for some of these systems, meaning that in terms of staying within the data protection guidelines and also data sovereignty as per law, these systems will have to be domiciled locally in the country.
Okay. I'd like us to flip back to the S25 briefly, because I remember when we were at the launch moment at the Carnival grounds, someone asked me, isn't it such quick succession between the S24 and the S25? And I think there are not many people more competent to guide us on what the upgrades look like when you look at the S25. Moses, take it away.
So I had the privilege of using the S24 Ultra when it came out last year. And for me, of course, it was a fantastic device as expected from Samsung. But amongst many small things, even just things like circle to search, again, the user experience allowing you to do more things more easily compared to your standard non-AI enabled phone. And that really was where I think Samsung set the pace for the whole industry. Even till today, many mobile platforms and even competing brands do not have what Samsung have. So they were very much a pioneer. I'll not mention the other company, but there is the other company that
Yes.
also recently launched their own propositions, and they're nowhere near where Samsung is in terms of innovation or even broad availability of these platforms and tools. So if we fast forward a year later, for me, what's generally really exciting me is the fact that apart from the device looking, the devices look quite similar to the older ones. In the Ultra case, we can see significant changes in the form factor. But more importantly, I think the innovation is on the inside. And that's why I think people might not be fully appreciating what the progression has been.
Yeah.
So we have processors, there's the Snapdragon 8 Elite, which, has been built specifically for this device. It means it's faster, it's more capable. There's a neural processing unit on it, which is upgraded from the previous. Very, very important for the AI processing on device. We have also seen with this year's models, the prices have actually come down. At a time when everything is going up, Samsung has actually reduced the price. Absolutely. And the device itself, remember, like I mentioned, it's not just about generative AI, it's now doing agentic AI as well. Now, just remember, only at the end of last year were people starting to talk about 2025 being the year of agentic AI. Yeah. And as we speak, we are still in January, and Samsung has launched a device with agentic AI capabilities. Now, if you think about that, we're literally seeing that this is a brand that is not just leading the way in AI, but as everyone is still catching up with what was done in 2024, they're already ahead of the pack again in 2025. And if somebody like me who uses AI for everything today, in terms of my work and everything, and I think to myself, hang on, so now my phone becomes a quasi-PA, I'm super excited.
It's your thought partner.
Because now it's even getting more capable, more performative in terms of what it can do for me. But I think to appreciate and fully get the benefit of AI, you need to actually adopt an AI forward mindset. And then even the way you do things and execute tasks, you should always be asking yourself the question, I'm doing it this manual way. What if I was using AI? How would I do it? Yeah. That's what I constantly ask myself. And that's how you'd get the most value from a device like this new S25, because it has these new capabilities. It's built into the phone. And I'm thinking, I want to see what's different between that and last year's model so that I can even get more productivity, more value, save more time, increase what I'm able to accomplish because it now has these new capabilities. So a lot of the innovation is actually what's been done on the inside, and less more so around the exterior appearance and so forth, which many would say looks quite similar to last year's, of course, but a lot of the progression has actually happened on the inside.
I like the point you brought around the price point, because I remember when the S24 came out, a lot of commentary that I got was, we feel priced out. But here you are with a more superlative device at a fairer price point. And the question here, Moses, is progressively, are we likely to see more superior devices coming at more affordable rates, because the issue of democratization of such devices is really big?
So one of the things I'm really excited about that Samsung is doing, if you look at the A series, for instance, right, the last year's generation of these phones also now support Galaxy I. Yeah. We also have the Fan Edition models, which usually come towards the end of the year. They also support Galaxy AI. We are also seeing that Samsung has committed to deploying their AI capabilities across more of the entry to mid-range devices that they sell. So in time, as much as some of say the premium devices may not come down by a lot because it obviously costs a lot of money to manufacture, develop, these things are built using titanium, these are costs that you can't run away from. But more importantly, the devices are going to be more performative, more capable, pretty much at the same price point. And the things you'll be able to do on your device because of those capabilities versus competing brands means that you're able to be much more productive and achieve more things because they have those capabilities. So I think the offset here is that you're getting so much more device capability at more or less the same price. Whereas I can't logically expect Samsung to completely drop the price, but you find that when you go to the lower ranges like the A series, you will be able to get these capabilities, which are still fantastic phones, by the way, at an affordable price.
Moses, sustainability and the green agenda. How do you see AI, broadly speaking, fitting into that conversation? Because certainly right now, it is the talk everywhere you go, and more also nuanced to the S25. When you interact with it, when you see its delivery, does it tick your boxes in terms of sustainability?
So one of the things I've noticed over the past year, even when I had the S24, I also had the Z Fold 6, which is now my daily phone I've been using for a few months. One of the things I've noticed very, very clearly is packaging. Right, the packaging nowadays is very compact, very it's just literally the device and the box. You don't get the sort of, it's not extraneous, it's not overly big. So already you can see that the use of the paper and the amount of materials they have there are significantly less, meaning that I suppose the carbon footprint around these devices is getting less significant. The other thing that I know Samsung is doing is also doing a lot of recycling. They're also recycling materials and using recycled materials for making their products, both in terms of the packaging and what goes into the device. And then, of course, there's the longevity of the device itself. The fact that Samsung is supporting the upgrades of Android and so forth up to the newer generations for quite a few cycles. So from that point of view, you'll find that somebody who's been using a Samsung maybe for 6-7 years can rest assured that they're still getting updates to software going forward. So all these things play into sustainability. And then, of course, as we talk about sustainability, I think we need to talk about the fact that because the device is more performative now, using AI and such capabilities, that means that you're able to do more things with less energy, less effort, in a way that maybe an older, less performative device could. So you're literally able to do more with less, and that makes it essentially more efficient. And the more powerful and the more capable these devices become, the more they play into sustainability in terms of the fact that you can derive value from it for a much longer time than what was there previously.
Okay. And Moses, you have mentioned the aspect of being more performative more than once. For the avoidance of doubt, when you speak about that, exactly what are you touching on?
I think for me, it's kind of like the broader concept of, especially in the AI era, what does AI allow you to do? For me, I have an acronym, I actually call it FESBEC. Okay, and FESBEC is an acronym I created about 2 years ago. But I always like to think of AI as something that is almost like augmenting human capability, right? So when I talk about performative, the fact that the device has the AI capabilities, and then now it has these agentic capabilities as well, it means that you can do things faster than you would before. So that means you're saving time by doing so. You're able to do things in a way that is more efficient. The fact that it kind of makes your tasks simpler. In some ways, I think it actually makes you smarter.
Moses, close our conversation. Give us your moonshot. Where are we heading with this AI beyond what we have seen so far? Of course, a device like this one then revolutionizes the conversation entirely.
I honestly feel, from where I'm sitting and what I know, what I see, I consume a lot of content regarding AI and all things AI. I'm a user of AI at a very high level. And also, in my day job, I'm looking at how we can bring AI into not just what we do in our processes, but also how we can serve our clients, to perform better as businesses using AI. The thing that I think that is key to me right now is that I'm genuinely concerned, especially in markets like Kenya and Africa, that people are underestimating how big AI is going to be in terms of the cross-cutting implications. Education, agriculture, healthcare, jobs, and so forth. Logistics. In every context you can imagine, AI is going to play a role. And this goes beyond the internet itself. Because when I talk about medical diagnosis in the hospital, Those machines maybe are connected to the cloud to access models that are able to interpret what you're seeing on an image. But ultimately, the cross-cutting nature of this tool means that if you are in the world and doing anything today, you need to be asking yourself, in an AI-first world, how am I positioned to either be a winner or a loser in this space? And that means learning the necessary skills to take part of it, using the tools and platforms that are already readily available, becoming competent in how you actually can use AI-based platforms, and more importantly, continuously questioning yourself and asking yourself as an individual or as an organization, is this the best way to do things?
Yeah.
If we did it in the AI model, how can we develop an AI strategy? Should we be auditing our business processes? What does it mean to involve AI? Should we be, for instance, empowering our workforce to have devices that have AI built in because potentially they can be more productive and more effective in their day-to-day tasks?
Yeah.
And I think because of that clear principle, I think the thing you need to ask yourself is always, am I ready for this AI future? And am I equipped to be productive and successful in that coming future? Because it's already here. It's only going to accelerate from this point onwards. And even as the price comes down, the cost of access comes down, and so forth, many people in many industries are going to get disrupted. But the winners are going to be those who see AI not as a problem or an issue, but as something that can augment their organizations and individuals to be more productive.
All right. Moses Kemiwaro, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
So are you AI ready? If you aren't, maybe it should start here with the Samsung S25. This device just recently launched. Fantastic experience. You should have a chance and even just interact with it and see whether it is something which can revolutionize and change how you engage with your day-to-day life, commerce, and everything else that you do. The capabilities are enormous. So we shall continue highlighting how embedding AI in our day-to-day lives is changing how we do things, how we think about life, how we execute our tasks, and more importantly, to remain ahead of the curve as Samsung is in this issue of embedding AI in our mobile telephony. Stay tuned to Business Redefined.